to then a very obscure reference that Jesus uses. So if we know that God is up and we want to be renewed, and being born again or born from above sets us on that trajectory of ascending towards God, then we have to orient our spiritual attention upward. And here's where this obscure reference comes in the middle of this conversation with Nicodemus about spirit and how the spirit is like the wind. Jesus says this. He says, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. Now, if you've never read the Old Testament or you've never heard this before, you would have no idea what he's talking about. So Jesus is bringing into this conversation something from the Old Testament and everything that they understand about that something from the Old Testament. Nicodemus is going to be familiar with the story and its meaning in the Old Testament. John's audience, at least some of them, the Jewish ones, they're going to be familiar with it. So we've got another symbol here, Moses and the serpent. What does it mean? What does this mean? How did they understand the story from the Old Testament about Moses and the serpent that we can now apply to Jesus? Okay? So, where do we find this story? Well, it's in the book of Numbers. Numbers 21 is 4-9. I'm only going to look at verses 8 and 9. Okay, so it says this, and the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live. Now, the key here is this word that here in this translation gets translated pole. The word is nes, N-E-S, we would say nes. So we're going to look at what does that mean? What is a nes? But notice here, everyone who is bitten, when he sees it. So you have to do something. If you don't see it, then you're not saved. When you see it, you shall live. Then verse 9. So Moses made a bronze serpent. He set it on a nes. And if a serpent bit anyone, he would look at the bronze serpent and live. So you have to look at it, and then you're able to live. So the key is this word nes. What does nes mean? Okay. So in Hebrew, the word nes, now there it got translated pole, but okay, it's got a wide semantic range. So it can be translated as standard. Now this would be a standard or a flag. So like the flag of a king. It could be the banner or the sign. If you're fighting under the banner of heaven, you're fighting for God. So in the ancient world, you had a banner of the whatever king you were fighting under. You're underneath that banner. So it's not just a piece of cloth. It stands for something greater. It stands for the authority of the king. Okay, so it could be a standard. And, even thinking about, if you think about a flag, the flag of a country isn't just a piece of cloth with colors on it, right? The American flag isn't just a colored piece of cloth. The American flag, or any flag for that matter, points to a greater reality beyond it. It's a symbol of the greater reality of the country it represents. And that's why flags invoke so much emotion. So a flag, a banner, something conspicuous. Conspicuous means you can't miss it. So it's something raised up that you can't miss. It points to the greater reality that's beyond it. And in modern Hebrew, the word nes means miracle. Something that can't be missed. That's a nes. And it points to something far beyond it. Not just a pole. The pole points to something beyond the pole. Now, We first find this word Nez in the book of Exodus. This is when the Israelites, they're attacked. They're leaving Egypt and they're attacked by the Amalekites. Moses goes up on a hill. He goes up on a hill to a conspicuous point and he raises his hands. That becomes the Nez. So Moses becomes the Nez. When he raises his hands, it points the attention of the Israelites up. And who is up? God. And when Moses' hands go up, they begin to win. When Moses' hands are lowered, the spiritual attention goes down, they begin to lose. After they do win the battle, Moses builds an altar to commemorate this battle, this victory, and he calls the altar Lord our banner, Lord our Nez, but the altar is the place to commemorate it. The Nez was actually Moses. So a Nez is something conspicuous. We can all see it. It points us to God. It gets your attention to point up to God. That's where we receive our power. So the Nez points us to something beyond. When the Israelites then, if you go back to the snake on the Nez, they look at the snake. It's not the serpent didn't have magical powers to heal. The Nez points you to a greater reality of the God behind it. The God behind it has the power to heal. Okay? It's really important because when we get to Jesus, we need to understand something about what Jesus is saying about the snake on a pole. And in the first century, they've already thought about this story. What does it mean from Exodus and the book of Numbers? And so one thing we can do is we can look to a writing from a group of writings called the Apocrypha. Now, the Apocrypha used to be in all of our, well, maybe not all of our Bibles, but like the King James used to print the Apocrypha all the way up until the late 1800s. The Apocrypha is in the Catholic Bible. The Apocrypha helps us understand how thought has been changing from the Old Testament, about ending about 450 BC, to the New Testament. So if we go to this, one of the writings in the Apocrypha called the Wisdom of Solomon, we find something here about this event that took place in the book of Numbers about the snakes. And we're going to see, how did they interpret? How did the writer of the Wisdom of Solomon interpret this event? It says, they, that's the Israelites, were afflicted for a short time as a warning. And they were given a symbol of salvation to remind them of your law. For the one who turned toward it, that's the serpent on the Nez, was saved, not by what he saw, but by you, the Savior of all. So according to the Wisdom of Solomon, the snake on the pole doesn't have magical power, but it pointed to the God who has the power to heal. The God that, the ultimate reality behind the Nez. Now it's going to get even better, because what we find out in the book of Isaiah is that the Messiah is going to be a Nez. This comes from Isaiah 11. No, Isaiah 11, the whole chapter is a messianic chapter. But verses 10 and 12, verse 10 says, in that day, the root of Jesse, now the root of Jesse is a descendant of David. In that day, the root of Jesse will stand as a Nez, banner, for the peoples. The nations, that's the Goyim, will rally to him. Oh, the Messiah is going to bring the Goyim, the Gentiles, in. And his resting place will be glorious. Now, if we think about it Exodus. What is happening? What is God up to? When we think about this idea of redemption in Exodus, in that day the Lord will reach out his hand a second time. Well, what was the first time? Exodus, the story of Exodus. He's going to reclaim the surviving remnant of his people from Assyria and all the places, okay? He's bringing them back together. They're coming out of exile, that second Exodus. Okay, then it says this, verse 12. He will raise a banner, Nez, for the nations, that's the Gentiles, that's us, and gather the exiles of Israel. He will assemble the scattered people of Judah from the four corners of the earth. That's redemption. So there's going to be a day when the Messiah becomes a Nez, the thing that points us to the God that is the ultimate reality. Now, just in case, we want to make sure we're not going to just pull from the Apocrypha. Let me show you one from its rabbinic interpretation about the story in the book of Numbers. And this will be on your handout. So you can find a link to the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah 3:8, and you'll be able to read it yourself. So it says, similarly, you can say that the verse, make for yourself a fiery serpent and set it on a Nez, a pole, and it shall come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he sees it, shall live. And once again, it may be asked, did the serpent kill, or did the serpent preserve life? Rather, when the Jewish people turned their eyes upward and subjected their hearts to their Father in heaven, they were healed. So who does the healing? God. And the whole point of this is that Jesus is our Nez. Now, in Hebrew, you have the word here, Nez. Okay. But if you want to say our Nez, you write it Nessi. Jesus Nessi. This ending, our. So Jesus is our Nez. And when he is raised up, like Moses raising up the serpent, he becomes a Nez. In many ways, he becomes a Nez. But we look up to the cross, to the one who's on the cross, and he points beyond to a much greater reality of God. That's what the Nez does. Now, this happens in multiple ways because, in one sense, Jesus, our Nasi, he's lifted up on the cross. So the cross itself causes us to look up. But he's also lifted up in resurrection. What a miracle. A miracle happened. It's conspicuous. You can't miss it. He's been lifted up. So he's a Nez because of the power of God who resurrected him. And if you look up to the God who saves, God will also resurrect you. And then Jesus ascends. He is lifted up to sit at the right hand of the Father, which makes him Lord. So in many ways, he is everything about what Jesus is doing. There's an upward motion. So when he says to Nicodemus, the Son of Man must be lifted up, does that mean that just like the snake healed you, Jesus will heal you? Not really. It's much deeper than that. It means that he's going to become the banner for the nations to come together under, to worship God. He's the Nez. He's the one who causes our sights to look up to God. He's also the miracle, the resurrection that took place, that gives us the hope of a resurrection in the future. And he's Lord because his life didn't end here on earth. He's resurrected, he ascends to the heavens, and he is Lord sitting at the right hand of the Father. So this is what Jesus is, and it all has to do with this idea that we are born from above. We have that natural inclination to look up to God. So we're rejuvenated and born from above. It's the transformed by divine power. The strength of our salvation originates from above, not from here on earth. And as we walk as a Christian, we have to remain looking upward. We receive God's power because of our Nisi, our Nes, which is Jesus, which keeps us focused on the God above. So let me finish with this. Psalm 121, 1 and 2. I lift up my eyes to the mountains, because where's God? He's up. From where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, and he is up. So I hope what you can see is all these symbols are swirling together. Redemption, bringing the people back together. Part of that plan is that we're all going to be looking for renewal upward. And as we get through chapter 3 and into baptism, you're going to see how all of these symbols and metaphors come together.